Mark. That's good information to know. I know a lot of people have interest in that. So it'll be interesting to see how that process goes moving forward. The next thing we have on the agenda is the check-in and demo process. I mentioned that that's part of the standardization. They are very close on having a good template for that. And what the goal is to have a minimum standard for the questions that will be answered on the form. This will cover the check-in, the demob, and the finance portion. And so whatever fire you go on, you will see the same minimum questions. We will have the capability to add to those questions if we need to, but I think there's a lot of questions and they'll cover most of what we need. But hopefully this will make transition between teams a lot easier and will cut down on a lot of confusion for the resources, because I know there's been a lot of questions related to resources and how this will work. We are also hoping to have an incident QR code generated that will be tied to these forms. So when we get our FireNet account generated for the incident, we're hoping to have the QR code too that will just go with these forms, and then we'll leave it with the incident. So then we don't have to create our own when we get there and just waste a lot of time doing that, and then having the next people behind us have to create a new one when they get there. So I think it will be really good. I think they're going to look at the final product here nationally really soon. Hopefully by the end of this month or beginning of next month, we should see something. If not, I will ask Tammy, the planning section chief on the blue team, for what they have for the template so we can get it loaded to our team website, and then also, or in FireNet, I guess I should say, and then start being able to use that. Because even if it isn't ready to go nationally until June or so, at least the 3 teams in the region want to make sure that we are on the same page and have some standard form that we can work from, just to make less confusion for everybody throughout the summer. Steve or Flint, do you have anything to add on that? I was hoping to have the template to show, but I have not received that yet. Are there any questions on that? Okay, the next topic on the agenda is the planning meeting and operational period briefing format. And I know, like in talking to Flint, Zoom is the preferred platform for a lot of folks because it's been easy for the cooperators to use. I know some of the other teams have used Teams and have had success with it, but Zoom, it seemed to work well for us last summer. That's what we used all summer as far as our meetings, for the cooperator meetings, for planning meetings, for any of the stuff with agent or other agencies or cooperators. And so Flint and Steve and I were just trying to get people's feedback going forward on what platform you want to go with moving forward this summer, and the process to see if it's been working for everybody. We just heard that Zoom may be going away in August, so that definitely is not a good thing if we decide to go with Zoom. So hopefully we can get some clarification on that and figure out if we are going to be able to use Zoom throughout August and going into the fall, because we are always on fires going into September, it seems like. So I just want to get people's thoughts on the process, what we used last year. Is it working okay? What do people think about the radio briefings? Are those working okay? I know there's, depending on the size of the fire, those are difficult because you can't transmit to certain areas some of the time from camp. But does anybody have any other ideas for improving any of those processes from last year?
Amy, this is Mark. The Zoom, I'm not sure what folks are hearing, which contract they're talking about, but the authorization we had last year were for teams that had individuals with the purchase card could go out and each team could get 1 or 2 accounts. And I don't think that option is going away. So, but that's, I think Zoom was a good platform to use, and Teams is fine. But I noticed some things just in the regular use of it here at the regular job, and at times it tended to freeze up with some different applications, and I'm not sure why on it, but I noticed a whole lot less of that with Zoom, if any. I think we'll need to make sure though with, one of those accounts that we had, I think was on Flint's card, since he's retired, we'll need to have a couple of folks at least be set up with a Zoom account on their purchase cards before we go out.
And right now I do have a Zoom account, but I don't know the purchasing side of it. They didn't tell me anything when I asked to move from Flint to me. So I don't know how that side of it works.
Yeah, I think there's levels. There's a free level that you can get, but then if you want the commercial level, which gives you access, and I think Brenda probably knows more about it, to where you've got more people that you've got access to, and some other features to it. But I think
Amy, what I had last year was it was the government forced Zoom account, but it wasn't the paid for one. It was the free one.
Okay. James Wheeler, our production assistant, actually has some information on this. James, do you want to share what you know?
Appreciate y'all letting me jump in here. Those Zoom licenses can be bought budgets because of the pricing. Typically, you can get up to like 10 licenses on zoom.us under that purchasing threshold. If you go above 100, it gets a little bit more complex, 100 seat license, and it might be to where you can't purchase it locally. We just need to pay attention to that because we had local purchasing power with Adobe Connect also, but Adobe Connect from last year to this year went up 1,000% just about in pricing, which robbed us of that ability to purchase it locally. As of right now, we've got capability for Zoom, and hopefully it stays that way. So as Mark was mentioning, we can get those local licenses. Just pay attention to the size of your seating arrangement. The problem, I'm just going to touch on Teams real quick. The problem with Teams, on top of what Mark was talking about, is there's complexities with file sharing. There was supposed to be a push in, maybe it was like 2 months ago, where Teams could now allow people that were guests to be manually added to that group. That way they wouldn't experience issues with file sharing stuff. But it seems, and again, this is just, it seems that we haven't either caught up with that or allowed that. So that file sharing capability that we have in here today, that Zoom has, is likely an issue on Teams across agencies. There's also an issue with chat functions across agencies. So if we want a kind of clear path to go across multiple agencies, Zoom is the way to go, and it's also the cheapest. So I just wanted to add that in. Hopefully that helps your decision making.
Hey, James, is that issue with a file sharing across agencies in the agency teams? I've noticed a difference between that and FireNet teams. FireNet seems to have more flexibility to allow guests and get into files and do work.
Yeah, so I think FireNet independently is managed and has its own group of people that focus on that and make sure that goes accordingly. But as Amy was talking about, we have kind of a fixed amount of those. And what becomes problematic too, I was part of a class recently where FireNet was used to pull people out of the Forest Service agency into FireNet using the drop-down box at the bottom right of Teams. But there's problems with that because people that are using a VPN that jump into that have to turn off their VPN. And if they're not tech savvy, or if they haven't been briefed on it, when they try to return back to non-FireNet, they can't get any of their email to work. They can't get their Teams to work. You have to do something kind of weird and finicky by toggling your VPN at a certain time, or even resetting your computer to get it to work appropriately. So it can degrade operations in the normal sense by using FireNet Teams. So until I think they iron that out, just in my personal opinion, I would absolutely stick with Zoom because it gives us just so many different positives versus having to work around real-time issues. And if there's already a stretch for IT folks, adding complexity probably might not be a fantastic idea, at least in my opinion.
Yeah. Just to follow up on the Zoom stuff, the PIOs at the IMRR level are, and probably not just the PIOs, but they're working on getting the Zoom licenses pushed at least through fire season in the fall, and also looking at if we can upgrade it. So Amy, the account that you have from Flint, to include the webinar function. And so we've talked about that and they're trying to make that change, which will be helpful for things like public meetings.
So let me jump in one more time and just let you guys know that if you're talking about these ideas or working through these, please reach out. I'm happy to sit down and have a conversation and kind of look at these ideas. And us at NAFRE, we can collectively look at whatever it is you're doing specifically for a more case-specific prescribed answer. Okay.
Thanks a lot for that, James.
I already said it, but I just reiterate, Zoom is the best platform for the cooperators. You know, I regularly attend meetings with county commissioners and others, and they all use the Zoom platform, so they're familiar with it. It's user friendly for them, and Teams is not. When we invite them into our Teams meetings, we struggle with a lot of the things that we just heard about. So, and I'm glad to hear that it sounds like there's a good push to not have this tool go away. But the last I had heard on some of the IMR calls that was not still a done deal. So whatever Mark and Dan can do to help us be able to keep that tool, much appreciated.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is we should use Zoom going forward unless for some reason it ends up going away later. But I think it's unanimous that is the best platform to use this summer. So let's continue to do that. I will double check on the account I have to make sure that we can use it for up to the 500 people or whatever, and it just doesn't cut us off like the free one does at 100 people. So we are set up for summer. And then I do agree with Mark, it'd be good to have another account if we could have a couple. I don't know if maybe it'd be good for the liaisons to have one too, just so we have one in plans and maybe one of the other functional areas or PIOs, you know, just so we are covered in case one of them for some reason is not working. So as far as the operational period briefing, anyone from operations, do you have any feedback or suggestions for improving that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I've got just one thing, and I think it's related to the radio equipment. And I don't know if there's a better option out there, but it seems like every other day, you know, we had issues with the comms, with those 1972 handsets that are duct taped to the chair. You know, I mean, there's got to be something better out there, and I think it's an equipment issue. It's not an operator issue or anything against comms, because comms always does a great job trying to fix things up. But you know, we're talking to the field. That briefing is for the field resources, and that message was clunky at best, and it's really based off the equipment, not the message. Because you know, we do well with our briefings, I think. So, you know, I think it's an equipment issue, and I don't know if, you know, the national cache has an option. You know, I mean, there's a lot better radio systems out there. We're just slow to catch up, and I think that's an issue. I heard from a lot of field resources, shot crews, divisions that just quit listening, because when the combos scratchy at best or hit or miss, you know, they have to revert back to the branches and divisions doing their breakouts, which they do anyway. So they're getting good, clear intent operationally. We're not missing that message. But from a team perspective, you know, voicing out our concerns or, you know, leaders' intent for the day from a team perspective, I think that's getting missed sometimes with poor radio commo. So I don't know if comms could look into some of those better options, if there is an option out there. I know they've talked about it before, but that's about all I got.
This is Barry for communications. I just talked with NIFC yesterday, and they said they have some new handsets in, but I fear that they're going to be much like the old. And it might be that we need to look for something as a team to carry with us for that sort of briefing. And we can look into that through NIFC and their contacts and see if we can't get a good piece of equipment. We feel your pain, believe me.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Barry. I know you guys work hard to make things work, so appreciate it.
Do we just put aside whether or not NIFC supplies and how we get it? Are we aware and do we know what the equipment is that we need?
Well, I don't yet, and not without
Yeah.
researching a little bit more, Mark.
Okay, that's what I'm wondering, is if it's an equipment thing. I think, you know, we've, as you kind of indicated, there's maybe some other options to get that equipment, whether we lease it Get it, it's always difficult and surprisingly difficult to get agencies that support us to pony up and pay for it. But if it's a few $1,000s, maybe it's something that the incident buys, and or we rent. And I think about this in perspective. We spent $200,000 on a tent per month, and we could certainly, I think, this is something that ICs can help work with, and if we need to purchase something or lease something that's better, it sounds like we just got to find out what it is.
Well, I think Kevin and I could work on that and get back to you on that. I'll certainly take that on.
That's a polite way of saying that the ICs can pitch a pretty good hissy fit.
Now, this is Dave, and I'd echo Pat that the radio brief has to be the priority, the radio part of it, over the Zoom. Many of the folks in the field are not in places where they have that internet connectivity and they can't watch the Zoom. And so Zoom's not an option. If our audience is the operational folks, the radio piece that's the part that has to get better.
Yep, I agree. To me, it doesn't even matter if we do the Zoom broadcast in the morning. What matters is the radio piece of it. And I know there's some people that want the virtual part too, where they can watch it electronically, but if we can come up with a solution and needs for the radio side and get it to ICs so we can purchase the correct equipment sooner than later, I think that would help resolve a lot of issues.
Well, I'll get with Kevin and we'll look into that right away.
Okay, thanks. That would be great. Okay, Flint or Steve, did you have anything else pertaining to meetings and briefings?
I know we were challenged on some incidents last year, getting IAPs out to some of these forward operating bases. And I know it's great having the ops people out there at those forward operating bases, and it's really efficient, but we do get challenged on getting paper IAPs out to them in the morning for the morning briefing before they go out on the line. We just need to be thinking through ways to be creative on how to do that.
Cindy, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to throw in there. I mean, I'm sure Mark and Dan are going to do this, but this is an issue on every fire, these radio briefings, with every team. I really hope nationally, the Forest Service and the fire community can come up with a solution without every team rolling their own. We just talked about consistencies between teams as they roll through these large long-term incidences. And I would really encourage you guys to push this up for some solution better than us having to pursue our own. I mean, we'll probably end up doing that anyway, but it's so unproductive for each team to have to do that. And again, if everybody has slightly different equipment, then, we want something that the crews that are going to be there as teams transition to have the same equipment. So I would really encourage you to try to get something that's more of a national standard.
Okay, anything else on that topic?
Hey, Amy, it's kind of a go back, but, and maybe it's to Brenda, but there was some discussion, the transition between teams and then having to change the Zoom call-in number. Everybody's all screwed up for about 2 or 3 days, and it causes a lot of grief. Is there any movement on whether it's a Zoom license, a Teams license, having that stay with an incident the whole time? Has there been any movement on that thought?
The only thing that I've heard about that is looking at contracting to set up the IT stuff. So they would develop the meeting and that contract would stay through the duration of the incident, which would take care of that. They would provide the equipment and meeting connectivity and all of that. So there would be no switch. I don't know where it's at, but that's the discussion, part of that discussion.
That is a very good point, Dan, and a concern on every fire last year. Anything else on that? Okay, well, you move on to our next topic, SOG changes and updates. I sent out the SOGs a couple different times. Everybody should have those. I'm not going to bring them up on the screen and go over everything line by line. There weren't much changes to content based on the last ones because we've been looking at it the last few years. We did add a section under the planning section tied to rosters. And so if everybody can take a look at that on their own, that is new. But let me read a piece to you. So every section should have their roster information. To me this year, since Lynn's retired, I'm taking over that responsibility. So if everybody can send their roster information to me no later than Monday morning before the team goes on call, then I can get it input and ready to go for sure. But please make sure you're reading through that, and it is up to the section chief or the team member to try to find a replacement before we just put them on the roster as unavailable. So please make sure you're looking at that. And then during planning levels 1 through 3 within the Rocky Mountain or Great Basin areas, a new roster is generated every 3 weeks then. But during planning levels 4 and 5, the roster needs to be kept current at all times. So keep that in mind too. If you'd have somebody in your section that's only available for that week, make sure your people are letting you know if they're going to be unavailable so we can have that roster to go, because as we know, all 3 Rocky Basin and Rocky Mountain teams, we could all be out at the same time. So that is one thing to keep in mind. And then as far as SOGs, the only other things for updates were like the contact list, the pre-order, and logistics. Once you get I think you did another update since the pre-order I put in there. So if you can send me your final version of the pre-order, that would be appreciated. And then the IWI, once you guys, if you updated that, I'd like to get that new copy too. Otherwise, the only other thing we really updated, there were a few changes in the operations stuff to clean up wording and an intent, and then just the formatting. A lot of the things were listed as bullets instead of just in paragraphs, just to clean it up and make it a little easier to read. And there was discussion, I didn't do it this year, but I know Mark and I talked about maybe for the next 3 years, depending on how the complex incident management team thing goes, having an SOG that's good for 3 years. Like if we were going to still have the same IC for 3 years, then we could just have it bound and printed, but we would have the contact list and pre-order separate. And so that would be updated every year, but maybe the SOG would be good for 3 years or so. So if anybody else has any changes to the SOG, please send that to me. I hope to get that finalized and get that to you, Dan, pretty soon. Does anybody have any questions or other comments related to the SOGs?
Hey, Amy, this is Kelly. I don't have a comment about the SOGs, but the pre-order, there's a change I need to make. So I just need to know who to get that to.
Just get that to Roy Spencer, and then he can get me the final changes.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, let's take a quick 5-minute break. I know we still have some stuff to cover, so I don't want to get too far behind, but let's take 5 minutes and be back at 10:53, please.
Folks, as soon as we get assigned to an incident, we work with logistics pretty quickly to identify where our meeting place is going to be, and then we'll let folks know where that is. We'll establish a calling list, if you will. I know we've got logistics radios, we have the operational radio, but there are a lot of our sections don't carry either of those 2 radios. And so currently we use a Google platform. It uses email, but sends you a text. And so we'll test that out on the first day to make sure we have everybody on the list that we want to have notified. And so we'll work through that process. Safety is right now responsible for sending those text messages out. If and when we get a call, some kind of a medical incident report, we make the assumption that that happens on the operational radio, but that could happen on a logistics radio. And so there are a lot of us obviously that don't have that radio either. But when communications receives a medical incident report, they quickly notify safety and medical. We do carry, the three of us will carry a little radio that will get notified. Safety medical will respond to communications and determine what kind of response is needed by C&G. I'll just take a look at the top part of the actual plan. If it's a green medical that's called in versus a yellow or a red, a lot of folks don't have a role when it's green, but safety will notify folks. Regardless of the medical color, you'll at least get a text, because some people will hear it come in and then they want to know, hey, what's going on with it? Do I need to respond? And so safety will at least send out a text. It could just be, and we'll send out what it is. It's a green medical on Division Zulu, and then we'll always let you know what we expect of C&G. And so we'll either tell C&G that no follow-up is required, and so you don't have to reply, you don't respond. If we want you to respond, if it's a yellow or a red, we'll ask for all C&G to respond to our pre-identified meeting place. We may request just a handful of folks, and then typically safety will follow up with the IC just to make sure that they are in the loop for that. The only folks that go to communications are medical and safety currently. Everybody else will respond to that pre-designated area. After one of the medicals that we had last year that actually required aviation, there was a slight delay in getting with our AOBD or air support. And so we're making the recommendation, this was one thing that came out of the safety in our medical group, at least for our team, is that the AOBD would respond to communications if they're asked to, and at least to determine if aviation is needed. If aviation is needed, then we can get that, and we're going to use incident aviation. We can coordinate that a lot quicker than medical having to come out to find the AOBD. And so Kelly, that would affect you, but that's, and I'll ask Kelly if you think, is that going to cause any, I don't think it'll cause any issues, but I want to hear from your perspective if that, I don't, what do you think?
Dave, I think that's fine, and kind of how I like to do it is either have myself, the air ops, or an air support at ICP at all times in the event that there is, you know, a medical that requires aviation, and that's something I've tried to always do, is make sure that one of us are always there for that event if it happens. So that'll work fine.
Yeah, and you know, hey, if you respond to communications and medical goes, you know what, it sounds like everything's going to be through ground. Hey, then you'll just go over to the yurt or the trailer, whatever it is that we're using, with the rest of the C&G. But I think Greg and Chris both agreed that having you respond there first, and at least identify if we have that need for air, we can get it going a whole lot quicker. And so once we're all assembled, we have created this checklist. Now this checklist very much mirrors what the type 2 teams are using. There are maybe within each section a few little tweaks that maybe folks on our team have identified that might be nice to do. But I'd like for you guys to go through your sections, and I can go through this a little slowly so that folks can see it. Hopefully you've got it opened up in front of you. But are these still the way that you do things? Are these still your tasks with COVID environment? We have, you know, some folks working remote, which then delays your response. I know on a lot of our incidents, finance was working out of a hotel and they weren't working right at ICP, which delayed their response. So maybe getting them on the phone. I know if we have comp claims remote, that can cause some concerns. Typically our comp claims will respond to the hospital as soon as we identify which hospital they're going to. And if they're working remote, that's not going to happen. One thing I think we identified going through this yesterday in our section, I don't know how often we share our checklist with our agency administrator. And that's something I think safety is going to need to make sure that we do, because they provide kind of that hospital liaison as quickly as possible. I know we try to send somebody from the team, and usually that's our comp claims, but depending on which agency it might be, we give that to the agency administrator. So that was something I identified. But hopefully each of you are looking through this to identify if there's anything different that we found after COVID that might affect your ability to perform these, or you have to do them a little bit differently. But each section, and then again, the colors kind of help you know that, yep, these are things that you got to think about. I'm not gonna read through it and go through each one, but I would expect each of our sections to have gone through it. Does anybody have any questions, any changes that they'd like to make to their sections? One section that we don't have, and I think for the last 2 years I've mentioned, I'll update it. I'm going to add a section for human resources. We don't carry a human resources officer, but for when we do, that is a position that we want to have respond. Back on the 416 fire, we had somebody from the Southwest, and they had their little laminated card, and so I'll probably just take the sections that they were required to do on the Southwest team. I think they line up pretty well with what we do, and I don't think there's any overlap. But are there any questions, especially new members that are wondering what their role might be or how they fit in? Crickets. I know it's something that, obviously we don't want to have to use, but we tend to get incidents that are large, lots of people. We get areas that are, we put folks at risk. We try to mitigate it the best we can, but one of our mitigation measures is to have a good plan to get folks off the hill as quickly as we can and get them to the appropriate treatment that they need to. So it's one of the more important parts of our plan that we have. We'll try to test it. We'll try to test it early in an incident just to get work. Every time, the first time you do it, there's always rust. We want to work that out. And so don't be surprised if on the first, within the first couple of days, we try to hold an incident within an incident. Just go do a trial run, make sure folks know where to respond. We'll always have copies of the plan in our meeting place, so folks will have access to that. A couple of years ago, we did provide some laminated copies. I haven't seen too many of those around, so maybe we'll look at doing that the first incident that we have, so we have them starting the year out. Get those to folks. But it's good to have a checklist right in front of you to make sure that you're doing the things that fall within your role. That's about all I had. If Tony or Chris, I know Chris is on the call, Todd Legler's on the call, John's on the call. Anything else you think folks need to know about our incident within an incident plan, if our ICs have anything that they want to add?
Yeah. Hey, Dave, this is Dan. Can you go down to the loafer section?
There you go. Small little section.
Yeah. I think that takes care of it, but one thing we noticed is the loafers tend to have a really close relationship with a lot of people, and you know how word of mouth and people listening to radios go. What we quickly need to establish, and maybe it's associated with PIO, we need to give people the proper place to go to get more information. A lot of times it's, the sheriff's office, it's somebody else, but they're the ones who get called and say, what's going on? And, then you get into privacy concerns and all kinds of stuff like that. So that might be one to talk to Tammy and Jay a little bit to flesh out a little more. And probably Brenda also.
Okay, yeah, we do have that coordinate with cooperators and key stakeholders. And yeah, there's not a lot of direction.
Yeah,
We leave it up to
that's the
them.
thing. So we've got to have them be careful about releasing advanced information to the cooperators and stuff like that. And that's what I'm talking about. They usually just get called right away, and I've noticed that, and then we have to think through where we send them.
Okay, Tammy and Jay, if you guys would get with me later, see if there's some other language you want to add to this bullet potentially on that.
Sounds good.
Tammy, it'd be similar to what is in Brenda and Dave's section. And
Yeah,
Michelle and everybody else that we got on the call.
We actually have a supplement to this because we only have the 2 bullets. So we'll just revisit that and make sure that we have a process internally in place to get that information quickly and make sure everyone has it.
Sounds good, Brenda. Thank you.
Sounds good. Now, since I'm going to be breaking into, because this is all saved almost as a picture, Brenda, expect a phone call soon to see if you still have this as a Word document or some way to add to it, because I want to add another section for HR. So it's a good time to make any changes to anybody's particular section. So good stuff.
Hey, Dave, I had originally been working on the SOG, and I don't know if maybe Brenda has the original on it. This form was a bugger to try to edit.
Oh yeah, it is.
And I gave up. I gave up. But the only thing I was able to do was to change the name at the bottom of it, and so I don't. Maybe Brenda's got the very original on it, and I can't remember if I had an original. But either way, I could not get it to act right.
Yep.
I do. I think I ended up making some of the edits to the PDF because I have a PDF editor, but yeah, I have it somewhere. So let's talk after.
No, Mark, I can feel your pain. So, but no, if anybody has any suggestions, please, in the next day or two, and I'll ask Amy, what's your hard deadline that you want to have any updates for the SOG? What's the time frame?
Well, I guess it depends on when Dan wants to go to print. It'd be nice if we could have them like by the end of next week or the following week, just so we could start getting it ready to go for everybody.
Okay, so knowing that by the end of next week, then you need to give us a couple of days, because this is a booger to play with, and I imagine this is going to add another page by adding the HR section to it. So, and then depending on how much change we make to PIO and loafer. But anybody else, please, if you've got a question about your role and if it doesn't seem appropriate, how we do things with the Rocky Mountain Type 1 team, please ask. This is the best time to ask.
If anybody thinks of something else after this meeting, just make sure you get your updates or your comments to Dave by the end of next week, or you can put up in the chat now if you don't want to turn off your mic and speak.
Perfect. So, nope, just expect, the first time we get out, we'll have, especially in our CNG meetings, we'll talk about this and the process and make sure everybody's on the same page. So if and when, you know, our first incident, when an incident occurs, we'll all be prepared. So anytime you have, you know, new folks in your section, trainees or different folks that are detailed in with us, you know, please make sure you share this with them, go through our processes, and we don't want them to be surprised the first time we have an incident. So thanks, Amy. That's all I had.
Okay, the next thing on our list is emerging and established technologies. Marty, do you want to share some updates with us?
Sure. On terms of technologies, I think everybody's been talking a lot about, you know, Zoom meetings and presence in different camps. Let's say we had split functions where finance was in a hotel, ICP was at a different place, another group might be in a third location. All this stuff, and I think it was mentioned yesterday, precludes pretty good internet connectivity. I think that we've been really lucky the last couple of years in that we've had locations that have had good or fantastic internet capability. Probably my biggest fear is that we end up in a field in the middle of Wyoming that has happened in the past, and we have a satellite link for internet. I'm not really sure how all this would work with Zoom meetings and remote sites and enterprise EI suite kind of stuff. I'm not sure how we would deal with that because again, now the requirement is pretty significant with all the things we're doing to have good connectivity. So I think that in general, I know last year as we changed sites, that was a pretty high priority, is to figure out that we had good connectivity to the sites that we picked for. That being said, typically my priorities are to get the ICP network set up first because that's where GIS is, and their product, you know, takes time, and they have a pretty strong need to get on board fairly quickly. Things like weather and fire planning and so forth are pretty important, as well as check-in. Probably the next priority is finance or any remote locations that do bigger functions, because finance is always interested in getting their time stuff started as soon as possible and so forth. And then, you know, after that, it's the PIO shop and then the local meetings and that kind of stuff that has to be covered. And then finally, any support for like remote community meetings. But typically for like the remote community meetings, if the liaisons pick a site to have a remote meeting, typically that's outside of the ITSS purview. So when you do consider doing those sites, saying, okay, we're going to go to this firehouse and have a remote community meeting with people dialing in, one of the things that's going to be incumbent is that you have reasonable network connectivity at that remote site. You know, and if you need help with that, that's fine. It just assume that your first day out, you have to kind of have a contingency plan that says, hey, we may not be able to do this with all kinds of remote attendees. That's just something to consider because again, I don't know the sites that you pick, what their connectivity issues may or may not be in terms of availability. You know, the other thing that we've encountered is that now everything has gone to QR codes, lots of Teams/forms-based forms that need to get filled out for the check-in, demo process, COVID check-in, and all that kind of stuff. And then there's a bit of overhead associated with that. So there is a little bit of a time lag. Again, we're trying to be proactive and have everything ready ahead of time, but understand that there's going to be some amount of time that's going to be taken to get all that stuff squared away. And I'm just trying to set some expectations so people know that, hey, the first day, the first hour, you're not going to have every single form available to you. Again, we have good starting points, and the efforts that's coming out of the teams to standardize stuff is definitely a strong step that way. But if customizations and things like that are going to take a little bit of time. I think the things that also need to be considered is that, you know, from an IT perspective, we're here to help as much as we can. And in general, what that means is that we're going to try to get our network set up as fast as possible. I think that the thing you have to remember is we have somewhat limited resources in terms of hardware and connectivity. So if we make a plan for a facility and set it up a certain way, please bear with us until we get all kind of the other parts set up before you decide unilateral or whatever. I don't want to sit here. I want to move my whole operation, be it check-in or demob or whatever, to a completely different part of the camp or different part of the facility. That isn't without impact. And it takes some amount of planning and amount of hardware to make that implementation happen. Why, I have no problem making that change for you. However, you have to understand that you may have to deal with a quote unquote less than optimal situation for a day or two. So we get all the other parts done, and then we can go ahead and move and rearrange as you wish, okay? I know that Brenda and the PIOs have been working on equipment that they want to have in place for doing their kind of high-end meeting quality stuff that includes almost like a production suite of equipment. I know we've provided some lists of equipment, possibilities, and so forth. I'm not 100% sure where that sits in terms of was anything able to be funded. Again, with that, we can help as much as we can, but part of it is that some of this stuff is fairly application specific and requires a pretty dedicated amount of effort just to manage, let's say, a video production studio type thing for the PIOs. So again, if you're wanting to do that kind of stuff, initially you may have to kind of depend on your own resources to get that going. And like I say, we're more than willing to help out as much as we can. It's just a kind of a limitation of how much equipment we have, how much time we have to be able to do that. In terms of the meetings that are typically driven out of the ICP, be it morning briefings or planning meetings or C&G meetings, that kind of stuff, since, for instance, the IT people are at ICP, we generally can help with that, running those meetings for you. So that minimizes overhead for, let's say, a planning team or a C&G team. And we're typically there to run those meetings for you. So I think that's a very reasonable kind of thing. It's just kind of the special stuff that may take some time or may take some extra resources that we'll have to plan for. Some of the other things that as IT people, like Dave, you were talking about wanting help with forms and stuff like that. Typically, I know I can speak for myself, I carry a ton of different tools, PDF editors, ability to scan, ability to create documents, make spreadsheets, all that kind of stuff. So if you have those needs, please keep in mind that we're here to help you with that kind of stuff. It's stuff that we can do, especially after the first couple of days. We have a significant amount of bandwidth to do that kind of stuff. So there's no point in struggling with, hey, I can't get this to work, can you help me? Please feel free to ask, because that's stuff that we can do relatively easily for you. Just a couple of things going, just kind of a couple of things to make things a little bit easier. If you're going to be bringing your agency computer and you think you're going to be wanting to attach a printer or use a network printer or add a second display, again, we know some of the back doors of how to make all that stuff work, but some of the agency computers are so locked down that it's virtually impossible for us to do that. So you need to, if you're thinking of doing that, make sure you know how to get a hold of your agency help desk to see if you have to do anything special to get rights ahead of time to make the changes, or know how to call the help desk and say, hey, I need to add a driver, so that that can be a little bit easier. Because again, I'm not an agency person, so I don't necessarily know all the back doors for BLM or Forest Service or whatever. I mean, we've obviously learned a lot, but there's always a nuance and things change from year to year. So again, if you think you're going to bring an agency computer, make sure you at least know how to get some support for it if you need it. If you like a specific mouse or a keypad or a keyboard even, or even a mouse pad, think about bringing your own, because we do have stuff on our trailer, but it's not necessarily going to be exactly what you're expecting. And I mean, a mouse or a keypad or a mouse pad is not expensive. Think about just adding it to your kit. Another thing you might consider is throw a USB thumb drive in if you're allowed to use them through your agency. Throw in a power strip. Again, these are little things that we have, but in the rush at the beginning, it's very easy to deplete our 20 power strips. So if you had your own, that's just something that'll make things just a little bit easier for yourself. It's just like bringing a pen or a pad of paper or whatever. Again, we do our best to accommodate, but if we don't have it and you have your own, that might just make things just a little bit easier. Other than that, I think pretty much, like I say, looks like we're gonna be at split camps again this year. It looks like we're gonna be internet intensive with Zoom meetings and so forth. Teams is definitely gonna be a player in terms of sharing documents, documentation boxes, all that kind of stuff, adding people into the team as guests, all that kind of stuff that we did a lot of last year, I don't think is going away. I think we've got a handle on how to do that. The only thing is sometimes it may take, it may not be 5 minutes, it may be an hour before we can get it done, but that's just kind of the nature of the beast right now. Other than that, I don't see any major changes happening, but and we're generally really good about being able to adapt to a lot of different stuff, but certain things we just won't be able to do for everybody on the first day. I hope that reality isn't a surprise to anybody, but again, we'll do our best. And again, feel free to ask for whatever you need and we'll do our best to get it for you. Any questions about any of that?
Yeah, and Marty, this is Mark. Couple things here. So I had you last year at the end of the year there at Cameron put together a list of some hardware that you carry with the team that you thought we needed, and that we not thought that we do need. And so it was one of the things I didn't get done before I was retired was to talk to the director of the Forest Service there in Region 2 about getting some money to buy that stuff. But then also that's in the works is they're talking about putting together a national contract now here, and it won't be this year, but in the future where, contractors show up with that equipment that we need. But short of that, in the interim, for the list of equipment that you put together, and let's assume that we don't get an agency to pony up the money for it, is that something that can be ordered and leased on an incident?
The stuff that I think a lot of the stuff that we talked about was kind of for the PIO presentation stuff, the cameras, the camera mixers and so forth. To be honest with you, I don't have a lot of visibility of what's available kind of in a lease environment. I know that Brenda and team were able to find a local video contractor to do that work. And generally that the video contractor basically as part of the service brought their own equipment and we're able to do that. And I think that probably in the short run, that might be the way to do is find like a production company that can, let's say an audiovisual production company, because that you basically buy more of a turnkey service and you're not trying to have to put together a bunch of gear and troubleshoot it and make it work together because it's something they're familiar with. I think that'd be the best approach on that.
Yeah, I think some of their stuff, I know we had worked on and got some of it purchased. I was thinking more in terms of servers and some other type of equipment out there that I thought was on the list. Is that stuff that you need? Or are you okay in that category?
I think in general, there was a discussion yesterday about our like 10 or 8 or whatever laptops we have in our cache about them going away. It looks like those aren't going to go away at least this year. So I think we're covered in that aspect so that for the first day when we're trying to get an IEP out and so forth, we do have hardware to bring up. We have some printers and that kind of stuff immediately available to us while we wait for the rental cache to come in. That typically includes lots of printers and 30 computers and so forth. In terms of network infrastructure gear, we have some on our trailer, and I definitely carry a ton of it to be able to deploy multiple networks quickly because I pre-configure all of my stuff. So it's very plug and play, not much configuration done on scene. So I try to preempt that as much as possible to be as efficient as possible. Kind of a suggestion that came from Brent Spencer last year was to think about rolling out, let's say, my equipment cache for the network and then immediately start reordering the cache so that after we get done with the incident, we can literally walk away from the incident, leave our gear behind, have new and updated gear for our next incident. And then that way, any team that's coming after us doesn't have to scramble to get their network set up. We basically just say, here are the keys, go ahead and drive. and we don't have to have this weird transition of scrambling between equipment. And I think that's actually a really good idea. I know that after our last incident last year, I left my gear behind, and the team that came after us pretty much ran the whole incident on my gear. And then eventually I got it back, which turned out really well. I think that, like I say, to answer your question, in the short run, we have a bunch of equipment. We can generally manage stuff quickly. And I think I'm going to look at seeing if we can start replenishing some of the gear, charging it to the fire, and then even loading up our cache a little bit more, so that going forward, if let's say I'm not there, but our team trailer is, again, that gear would be available.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at, was that we could leave the fire, stay functional. There's things that you rent or however they are that's left behind, and it sounds like you guys are figuring that out. So, okay, all right, thanks.
Any other questions or concerns?
Yeah, I don't know if you're watching the chat, but Blake, the contractor that we had on Cameron Peak last year, did put a proposal together of some of that video equipment, and it was pretty expensive. So after a conversation with him, he's going back to come up with a proposal that's a little more realistic, I think. So
yeah, I think the number I gave to Dan and Mark last year, I don't have it in front of me, but it was in the $20,000 to $30,000 range for a couple cameras and some switching equipment. That would be very much towards the production stuff you guys were doing. It's way beyond, let's say, for a C&G meeting or a planning meeting, but it's more for like your community meetings and so forth. And again, I think in the short run, you may have to, like this year, if we don't get the budgets or whatever, is just to hire a contractor that can basically do the turnkey for you, so that we're not trying to come up to speed on all this gear.
yeah, and I'm thinking there will be some things coming out of the IMRR discussions with some of that purchasing done at a higher level. So we'll be ready. I'm feeling okay.
And if you hear anything about, hey, we're getting this gear, please reach out to me ahead of time, so that I can even come up to Fort Collins or wherever you are, and we can go through it and be ready, so that it's not like a scramble at the last minute.
Sounds good.
So I guess that's the point I wanted to close out on then for is that, and it sounds like you're already on it, is get what we need to do the quality presentations, whether it's by hook or crook or having to lease it by incident or whatever it takes. And that's the end result, is that I think everybody's on board with that. We need to have the right stuff to do the quality presentations, and that's needed for the job.
Yeah, and I've got in my own kit some higher quality cameras now, good microphones, that kind of stuff. Things that we had trouble with. I mean, again, it can support maybe one aspect of a meeting, or an early community meeting, or an early PIO type meeting. And then as time permits, I think we can bring a contractor in. Yeah, the first couple of days may be a little bit less than CNN quality, but I think it's still doable. It'll still be better than just using the cameras we had last year.
And I do know that there's a national effort going on right now to try to look at a standard, or a minimal standard anyway, for what is needed for productions for meetings and equipment and all the technology side. And so something might be coming down in the future on that. And maybe there will be some funding or some support for us to get some of this equipment as well. But we'll have to see. I think some of the PIOs are involved in that, and I'm not sure who else at the national level, but I've heard some rumors about that. So we'll see. And then one other thing I had tied to this, I know that the military, or I've heard that the military has some ways of just satellite connectivity that's really easy and works well for them, just for remote operating bases. And I don't know if there's any way that we could tap into their technology or their resources to provide some of that for us at some of the forward operating bases, or areas that we're having bad connectivity issues. So I don't know, Marty, if you've heard anything about that, or if logistics is aware of any of that stuff. But I think that might be something to look at going forward, just because we always have issues out there in the field.
Yeah, I don't directly know. I don't have huge contacts with the military, though. There is a military base that's actually the fire district. We have a mutual agreement with them. So I definitely talk to them. So I can kind of reach out through some of the channels I have, but it's not, I'll see what at least they have availability wise. I'm sure a lot of it is in that whole secure, if you use it, we'll have to kill you kind of thing. We'll see. I think, like I say, I think the one thing we have to really, my biggest fear is that we've set our own standard internally of having really great internet connectivity the last couple of years. I mean, we've been very, very lucky. But I know 3 years ago, we were in the middle of a dirt field in Wyoming, and 2 megabits was a lot. And I'm really afraid that we're going to have an incident like that. And I don't know how we're going to make it work. So
Yeah.
I think that's just the big unknown that I don't have a good answer to.
Yeah, definitely stuff to be looking forward to trying to figure out in the future, because we are going to be doing remote and virtual stuff. And I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon. And I know, like with the agency administrator expectations, we're going to have to try to figure something out for sure.
And I think that's probably also going to be fuel to that concept of saying, hey, it makes sense to put people in hotels and that kind of stuff. I know that was a big, big issue. The battle that Dallas had to fight last year about, or Dan had to fight last year about paying for hotels. But that's definitely going to be part of that formula, is because internet access is going to be critical for a lot of this stuff.
Yep. For sure. Any other questions or comments for Marty before we move on? Okay, thanks a lot, Marty, for that update.
Okay.
The next thing I'd like to do is to have a discussion about what we can do better as a team, any topics, any items that we need to improve on, and how we can improve. I know we talked about the briefings and the technology side of that already. I know some of the IT stuff Marty just mentioned, we obviously know and had issues with as well. Is there anything we might not have mentioned that we need to bring to everybody's attention so we can improve on for the upcoming season based on what we did or how we operated last summer? I know from the planning side of things, just a new check-in and demob form, a standard. I think standardizing a lot of the things are going to fix a lot of the issues we had from the plan side. I know there is some stuff with OneDrive and sharing GIS files and stuff like that, but from the planning side, I think we're moving forward pretty well in a lot of areas.
I thought one thing that we did last year, and we hadn't done it before, we started a text messaging with all of our agency administrators and some of the key cooperators when there were significant events happening. It was Dan's idea, and I think it was really effective, but got to figure out how to do it better. So it's another technology thing. It's hard to send text messages between iPhones and smartphones. So anybody out there that is smarter than me and has done large group texts and has some ideas, I think it was really effective in terms of keeping people informed of key events and as they were happening.
One of the things that the PIOs are looking at through the IMRR is some sort of group texting, typically within the PIO functions, because we're so large. We like to use WhatsApp or GroupMe, and none of those applications can be put on a for service phone. So nationally, they're trying to take that to the CIO and say, hey, we need something like this. What is that option? And so whatever they come up with from that can certainly be used for the notification for the cooperators. I thought that worked great on Cameron, and just dedicating a PIO to help feed some of that critical information out. I would definitely like to see that moving forward.
Yeah. And ops, that the information that you were, streaming in live from the field, and it was going out to the cooperators was really, really appreciated. So I don't know what you all thought of that, but.
And it may not be needed on every incident, but certainly with what was going on Cameron Peak, I think it was necessary.
I think from the operations side, and anybody else can weigh in on that. I think some of the things that we can do better, we're going to try with just kind of beefing up the the planning ops function, get an extra person in there to kind of help out and get information to the rest of the team, better connectivity with the field back to CNG. We're going to run that kind of beta test this year, having an extra guy in the box with one. I think one thing that works out really good, I'd like to see continue. I know we've done it for a long time, is Brenda, you put a link up an operations PIO that can just kind of hang with us and be your liaison back and forth to get information back. I think that I think we talked about, we'll brief in the morning, we'll go around the horn, this short and fast. The meat and potatoes of the briefing is the division breakouts, but and then generally there's a PIO briefing after that, which is I'd like to see that focused more towards, and you and I can talk about specific changes that weren't covered in the briefing. I don't know how you feel about that, but having that person there just linked up with us is a good thing. We want to see continue. The forward operating bases and all of that stuff, I think I think we pulled it off really well, the way we did it, from just basically hitting the ground running and not ever really doing it quite that way. But we talked about, and I think Dan and Mark are going to talk a little bit more about distributive operations, and we need to figure out things that we can do better as far as keeping the logs folks and safety, especially more forecasting and thinking about where we're going to be at. And Pat discussed a little bit about that, about our 24-48 and even farther into the future. But all in all, I just want like the IT portion of it and the delivery for operations at cooperator meetings and some of those meetings. I mean, it seemed like it was kind of clunky to kind of get started, how all that kind of meshed together. And I think a lot of it is like what Tammy's looking for, hardware issue that we might be able to get. But I'm kind of rambling now, but I'm looking forward to the season and improving where we can. We kind of have an idea what we need to do a little better. So all in all, Pat, got anything?
No, Rob, I think you covered it. That's going to be the big thing, a change in the ops world, at least to the ICP for planning ops, is we're just going to add a branch down there to assist with the high demand of information flow with the team and public information and ordering resources. Minimum of two planning ops, but really we're going to look at 3 in the box, and then field ops is not going to change. That's going to be pretty straightforward as it was. So that's probably the biggest change that we're going to try this summer, and we'll see how it works. I think it's going to work better for all of us. So that's all I got.
Hey, this is Dan. I'm trying to start my video. A couple things in your world that Mark and I'll make sure we do came up in Cameron. We'll ask the agency administrator if they've developed pods, and then also ask them if the pods are tied to the 911 grid, because that was, we were having to work on the fly with the sheriff's office on the 911 grid to do evacuations, and it should have been tied with the pod. And then if they have pods, we'll make sure we get them onto the ops map. So that was a couple things that I had identified in your world, you guys.
Yeah, copy that, Dan. And like you said, if we can staff that strategic ops role, that's going to be key. Like we did on Pine Gulch with Jay, that was that was pretty helpful to take that workload off. But yeah, definitely, you know, pods and anything spatial, you know, with that out planning, looking out, that's gonna benefit everybody.
Dave Bitlar.
Yeah, just a couple things, one from safety and then one from state of Colorado. So the safety item, I know on Cameron, we weren't in the same room with ops and aviation. And so logistics, I just asked that we can find a place large enough that we can be in the same room with those two folks. And then from a Colorado, we used the surge quite a bit last year, starting Labor Day and then moving forward, we used it with our team on Cameron. From the state's perspective, we're going to try to formalize that process a little bit more, how we're actually going to make it happen. But I think it's going to have some ramification on the teams that order those surge resources. If you're ordering them, then you'll process them, figure out the way that you want to check them in, get them on the IAPs. So we have accountability of those folks. Some surge resources made it on IAPs, some did not. But it's hard to have accountability. And if somebody's home unit were to call and say, hey, we need somebody from our engine and we don't have them on an IEP, we'll have a harder time finding them. You know, and then from a logistics, you know, obviously we'll support any of the resources that we order up. And I think we did pretty well, but we're going to ask the teams to fold them into their operation more and not just, oh, those are just the surge resources. You ordered them, you're responsible for them for those 3 days. I think having the remote check-in, the remote demob, finance demobbing should help get them in and out quickly. That shouldn't cause any delay, but I know you're asking for those resources and you want to deploy them as quickly as you can. So as soon as we have something formalized, we'll make sure all 3 teams get copies of what we produce. That's all I got.
Okay, while people are thinking, I'll just say we've got about 15 minutes left. And following this meeting, there is a breakout room set up for ops, aviation, and safety and plans as well. If you need a breakout room for your section, please type that in the chat and we'll get you one. Mark, what else did you have?
Yeah, I did want to touch a little bit more on distributed operations, and just from listening to the report outs, you know, from operations logistics, they're thinking about these things, and I just to reinforce it, that we're kind of, you know, with the mitigations that we put in for COVID, and we said, hey, we like the way this stuff works, we're going to do them regardless in the future, which is good. We're kind of outrunning some of the systems that are already in place, or the contracts that are in place, for example, with the food service and the way we want to do business in the field, that the food service contract isn't set up. That's going to take a while to catch up with us. And maybe just our own internal ways that we're used to doing business are having to catch up. So just to reemphasize, keep doing what you're doing, coordinating between logistics and operations, and you know, getting operations expressing what it is that they need from logistics and where they need the stuff at. I think it was, we talk about, we've got forward operating bases, we got spike camps, and then you've got this whole other level of folks that are kind of just spread out in the areas on their own, that they're taking care of themselves to some extent. We just want to make sure we still get the basic hygiene things in a place that's not exactly where they're at, but close by. And then the whole food delivery system now into these smaller and smaller pods. We've only got so much capacity out there with people, and I'm sure you'll come up with a design that works with the best you can. But I'd say in general, don't limit yourselves. Keep pushing the envelope on some of these ideas, and pushing back on the system that's in place. You know, when somebody says you can't do something, well, let's make sure we really can't do that. And you know, for example, ordering a type 3 cater and those type of things. we'll keep pushing there. And I just saw last year a lot of improvement as the year went on, and hang on to those things that we learned, and that's going to be a regular way of doing business. And I think the let's see, what's the other thing we already talked about? In complex incident management. Talked about IT. I think that's all I've got on there. Oh yeah, no, I did have one last thing. So the question I've got is, and this is for kind of logistics and operations, keeping in mind with this change in the way we're responding here in the field with distributive operations, does our items in our pre-orders match up with how we want to change and do business out there on the ground, as far as number of people, other equipment that we're ordering in, are they meshed together? And that's just a question for you. If you thought about it, great. If you haven't, maybe put some time into it. That's all I've got, Amy.
Okay, thanks, Mark. If anybody else thinks of any other items as far as what we need to improve and ideas for how we can improve those, please send those to me. I can share them with the team after this meeting as well. A couple other bin items we have are name tags and team apparel. And I'm not sure who was in charge of those in the past. Let's start with name tags. Can anybody fill me in and let the team know on the process of how to get those for this year?
Not hearing anyone speak up. I know previously, was it Vanway Trophies, and I think in Rapid City that was doing our name tags for us. I don't know if there's anywhere else or if they still are set up to do that. Dan, do you know?
I'm no help, Brenda, because I've never had a name tag since I've been IC.
Yeah, so Brenda, that Bandway still is doing stuff for teams
Okay.
here in Rapid. I'm kind of like Dan. I don't have one, but if you could get a list thrown together to whoever, me or whatever, Amy, and if you wanted a name tag, I could get an order placed. So I think they're pretty cheap, a couple bucks or something like that.
Yeah, I was thinking they were like $4 maybe a name tag, and I'm wondering, Dan, is there any funding or anything we could do at least for the new team members that don't have one, or do we want to just do one or two for everyone that's on the team this year, or is everyone out for their own?
I'll swing for the fences when I ask for the owl and for the money to print our SOG. I'll just add that much more on the requisition for a couple name tags for everybody.
Perfect.
Okay, so if everybody that needs a name tag or wants a name tag, give me your name and your title, and I can pass that on to Rob or whoever decides to place the order. We'll work that out later, but just go ahead and send your information with how you'd like it to me.
Yeah, just get it to me, Amy, and I'll take care of it.
Okay, sounds great, Rob. Thank you. Okay, what about team apparel? I know there's been a few different locations in the past of where we can order from.
Well,
Does
Amy,
anybody?
yeah, I managed that for the last several years. There are 3 different sources right now. There's one up there in Rapid City that's been around for a while, and Steve had one over in Rangeley, and then for the last couple of years we've gone with this place out of Fort Collins. When I retired last year, it's one of the things I handed off to Brooke Malcolm at Rocky Mountain Coordination Center, and I know she sent out some stuff because I've talked to the vendor in Fort Collins. They said they got pretty busy here in early March, so I know folks got some of that information, but it's basically the same ones we've had, and they have all the same information.
So Flint, people are saying that the login.
You cut off, Brenda. Oh,
Did I mute myself and I did?
Yeah, you did.
You did.
Some folks have been saying that the online, either the link isn't working or the login
Okay.
isn't working.
Well, there's a passcode to it, so just the general public doesn't start ordering our stuff.
Right.
And that I would have to get a hold of and see if that changed for this year. Get a hold of Brooke Malcolm at the Coordination Center.
Okay, so if you can do that, we will send out information for the link on where you can order teamwear and the passcode to get into the website. My understanding is the lady in Rapid City retired and may or may not be making team shirts anymore.
Yep, she did retire. I could check with the lady or with Rapid City. I know they do have, they're open, but I know with the Forest Service, when we checked on if they still had our logo, we had to give them a new logo. So I don't know for sure, if they're going to really be able to stay up and running and what they have, but I can check on that as well and send out something on the Rapid City option. Does anybody else have anything on that?
Amy, I would ask if there's enough interest that I should get another box of caps made up with the logos on them.
What do people think about hats?
Well, I know that vendor in Fort Collins does shirts, also does hats too. So if they want to order them individually, or Steve wants to do a batch, however you guys want to do it.
Well, if I do it, it's a box of about 20. So I'm gonna drop $300 to get them and bring them.
Okay, if anybody wants Steve to purchase them a hat, he needs to do it in bulk. So please let him know by the end of the week. I believe that you can purchase your own hats at the vendors too, but if you do want to be in the bulk order that Steve would do, please let him know by the end of the week, well, next week, so he can go ahead and order that if there's a need out there.
That works for me. Thanks, Amy.
Yep. Okay, one of the other things on our bin item list is the team website. Brenda's going to do some screenshots and send out some information regarding that since we are starting to get low on time. Is there anything else that we need to cover or bring up to the group before we're done for the day? Okay, it looks like Logs wants a breakout, James, if you could set up or put them in the additional room. Is there any other section that needs a breakout?
Okay, we got logs added.
Okay, cool, thank you. And I do see a question in the chat from Dan. Brenda, did the QR code for the team change?
Yeah, it took me a minute to figure out what the heck he was talking about.
Okay.
I will fix that. It's a dynamic QR, so the QR code should stay the same, but the site that it goes to can change. So I just need to do some homework on that. So your business card should be fine.
Thank you, Brenda. It always does. How I say things and then how you perceive them are two different things frequently.
Dan, Mark, or Tim, do you guys
Yeah,
have
I did
anything in
have one
closing?
other, wanted to make sure everybody saw that got a resource order to cover their time. That they got the correct, that they've got the correct code for that. And I got an email on it and I'll send it out again, but it's not, the original order had on a training code for the Forest Service. We got all that resolved, and there's another code here that folks need to make sure they use. And I'm scrolling through my phone trying to find the email. Well, go ahead. I'll go look for it here while somebody else talks.
Yeah, Mark, you can send it to Brenda and she can forward it to everybody.
Okay.
Yeah, that was Mark in particular, but Mark and I pushed pretty hard to make sure that that happened because it wouldn't have happened without us kind of pushing on it pretty hard. They had to scramble around and figure out where to pay for it from. So. Amy, I don't have anything else. Just again, appreciation for everybody that's rejoining us, and for those folks that are new, thanks so much for for coming on to the team. Looking forward to working with everybody. There's some kind of background, but I get to look at kind of secret stuff with some of the stuff I do nationally, and our team continues and has been for years the most efficient team. Considered the most efficient team by the metrics they use as far, so we only use retardant when we need to, and we're pretty stingy, and folks in the right places really appreciate that. So just looking forward with the operations we normally do, and all the learning and the stuff that we kind of add or do away with every year to make ourselves better. So looking forward to it. And I don't think we're going to have to wait as long this year.
Okay, well, just to remind folks, there is an operations aviation safety breakout room, a plans breakout room, a logs room. There is a room for the ICs if you guys wanted to visit too after this. Does anybody else have anything else in closing, or any last minute questions or comments? The breakouts will be immediately following this meeting and will be open for an hour.
Amy, I went ahead and got everybody divvied out based on their labeling. If I didn't get you divvied out, just remember that you can go to the room that you want by looking at the list of breakouts and clicking on that blue assign and send yourself off. If you guys have any questions, I'll hang around and drag you into the cadre room and find out where you need to go. Please allow about 15 to 20 seconds, not as many people as there were yesterday, so it should be a little bit quicker, but allow 15 to 20 seconds for that to carry over. That's it. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, James. Well, thanks, everybody. I think that concludes our meeting, and we'll be in touch with you as far as any information we get. Feel free to ask your section chiefs any comments, any concerns, anything you have, or if you need any clarity on anything. Well, thanks, everybody. Hope to see you soon.